Chris Kirathe from Ernst & Young, EY. You guys changed from Ernst & it's now just EY.
Yeah, well, we're EY.
It's just EY.
Yeah. Although we are still,
it's just EY.
Yeah. But the legal name is still, you'll find it's still, in some countries, still Ernst & Young.
Yeah. Okay, but the brand is EY.
It's EY. Yes.
EY, okay. So Chris Kirathe from EY and Abraham Rugo, country manager at IBP, International Budget Partners, Kenya. Chris, before you do that, let's hear the day's proverb again, CT.
Our proverbs for the whole of this week are from the country of Somalia.
Somalia.
A cat in her house has the teeth of a lion.
The cat in her house has the teeth
of a lion.
Of a lion.
Yes.
All right. Chris, you are reading the definition of person.
Yes.
And what is they're now changing it to?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So a person currently is defined, either the natural person, which means an individual, or a legal person, incorporated entities.
Okay.
But with respect to an individual, now that has been expanded to that individual and certain persons related. So you would have your, relatives.
Mm-hmm.
So, including your relatives, your spouse, ancestors, uncles, aunts, step-parents, nieces, and nephews.
Did they really say ancestors, or you threw that in for good?
No. It's actually ancestors. It's there.
What? And even steps.
Yeah.
Step-parents, nieces, nephews, everybody.
Yeah.
What do you think they're trying to get at here?
It's very, very curious because the incidence of tax is on the person. So I cannot pay your taxes, whether you're my brother, my aunt, my uncle, you also can't pay mine. So what this means is that, and this is where I was saying, without a clear rationale or a clear provision on under what circumstances this would apply, it would mean easily that your relatives' taxes could be on you.
It could also mean that KRA can actually come and attach my property because my brother owes them.
Exactly. And also, because now there is the provision of tax abandonment is not there, means if there's difficulty in collecting tax from you,
CT,
they collect it from your relative.
This Tala and these apps idea where they call everybody on your phone book.
Yes.
This is it.
In other words, you're guaranteeing your relatives' taxes.
This is it. It's curious and crazy at the same time.
Yeah. Some of these changes look harmless on the surface, but the implication is quite deep.
I've been trying to think about the implication of trying to, of course, expand the definitions. There's a lot of talk about non-residents also, foreign incorporated companies that are operating here. And there are two things that we have not quite resolved about foreign. There's a whole area around beneficial ownership. Who actually benefit from these businesses?
Yeah.
Including for even things, goods and services that we buy from abroad. When we import maize, who imports it actually? When we import sugar, who actually imports it? Who are the beneficial owners of this? But the second one is the whole idea about tax expenditures. So the tax forgone, the EPZ type of tax rebates that we give to companies. But I don't see the language of those dealing with those issues, because if we assume the biggest problem why tax is not being paid is because the actual owners do not either reside in the country, and therefore because there's this tax that would be repatriated. But you don't see the language, especially on the matters around beneficial, which for me is a big accountability question. Do you think that's what they're trying to resolve? in trying to expand this definition of the person, because that has been the sticky issue. 500 billion every year on tax expenditures. 200 in the last 2 years, about 500 billion, which again is a significant amount because it's tax that is forgone for purposes of promoting business. But it's not business that is necessarily Kenyan business. A lot of it is foreign owned, because it's producing for export. Especially the EPZ. And these are some of the things, in my opinion, that we should be tying in.
So it can capture that tax.
So that then you have that tax that already brings you 500 billion. I'm not too sure increasing 5% on guys earning more than 500k, who are a very small number.
Is there what? 2,000 people?
Yes, 2,000 people will bring you 500 billion.
It won't.
At least. But perhaps it's a good time for all MPs and senators
to feel the pinch.
To feel the pinch. But I don't know how they recoup it back. So for me, those accountability, those issues that are glaring on your face, if it is these companies that do business, you know them and you can net them.
Yeah.
But then taxes, good as they are touted to be, shouldn't compliance be brought about in a foundation of attendant benefits as well?
Correct.
Because if all I'm doing is paying taxes and you're not enticing me by telling me what I stand to benefit, or say you raise that, you say if I make, say, 500 million shillings, that they will only tax me 200 million, the other 300, they don't. I mean, whatever it is people do to make people feel that you are willing to make more and you're also willing to declare whatever you make. Because everything that we're talking about here points towards people going out of their way completely to ensure that the taxman knows as little as possible about what it is that they earn. So that even when the issue of tax comes about, you will be quibbling over the amount that the business owner has determined to show you. Yes.
Because you see, I have to declare my tax.
Yes.
It's me to declare my taxes.
Yes.
And once I declare, I need to declare my income, and on that then be able to pay taxes. But as you're rightly saying, and I think it's a point that we were trying to emphasize on earlier, that tax must not be interpreted as an end in and of itself. The goal of government is, even in our constitutional framework, really, you have the rights and responsibilities. I have a right to access public services, but I have a responsibility to pay taxes and to support the government of the day by not disrupting public services, including by not paying taxes.
Yeah.
Government, on the other hand, has a right to receive my tax, account for it, but has a responsibility to first account for how that money is being spent. Two, to give me the kind of information I need to know where I get my services and and how I should get. But most importantly, to provide me those services, whether it's education services, and you heard the announcements over the weekend about how education services are now going to be to be paid for. CT, I know you have a lot to say about that. And if you're not providing those services, then there's no incentive.
Yep.
There's and I think there are studies on the correlation between tax compliance and public administration of those taxes, or public usage. So, and the minute people, especially the ones who are not in the formal sector, the ones in the formal sector is your salaries. I mean your company has to, there is direct visibility.
Yes.
Those ones have no reason but to comply. But in the other sectors, or the informal ones, once they, there is no, or they don't view like their tax is meaningful, is just going to, pockets, then compliance dips. So to your question, yes, there is need to, on the expenditure side, to actually demonstrate
what you're doing with the money.
Yeah.
Is it a law?
Is it a law?
Is it a law that government is to make or to be accountable for the money that comes in via tax as to how it has been spent. Is it in law?
Yes.
Okay.
It's in
That's
law.
why, right. That's why we get the audit reports and things like this in terms of where there's a gap or anything like this, for which we've often asked the question, in as much as the Auditor General then plays her role now as, reporting where there may be gaps or such. She doesn't have any prosecutorial power. She cannot go investigative in any way, or she just must report. But then we've seen that there's laxity then in making sure that those holes are actually closed. So it seems as though we are in a game whereby a dog is chasing its tail with really usually when we see it chasing its tail, the dog is actually quite animated to catch this tail. But in this case,
and it's actually convinced one day.
It's convinced that one day it will catch the tail. But it's the same game, but here it's like, okay, I'll try and catch the tail. If I don't catch the tail, but I'm still going to continue playing this game for people to see and be entertained. I know I'm not going to catch the tail. I have no interest in catching the tail, but let's keep something shiny for Kenyans to look at. How bad can it get before you get to the place where neighbors just here north said, you know what, it's too much. People further north got on social media one day and the Arab Spring was born as a result of that.
Correct.
People even further north in Lebanon said, you know what, to hell with this whole thing, the whole government, you who've come in are worse than the ones who were there before. If you want to go to South America, people in Chile did even worse. How bad does it have to get for people to be able to say, you know what, because let's be honest, public participation itself is a joke. The manner in which it's carried out is an absolute joke. Because come and participate. How do I participate in something that I have no idea about how it has been put together? Because let's be honest, this finance bill, which is making the rounds, for you to have a look at, very few people understand the elements of it. And you're asking these same people, we've also seen the same flyers around social media telling people to come and participate. How do you participate in something that you have no understanding about? How do you do that?
Yeah, there is this public participation bill, and I think I don't know if it's become an act yet. Not yet. It's been there for a number of years.
Yeah.
That should provide, how does public participation look like, so that it's not just a ticker box exercise, so that we do not spend a lot of energy responding to something that has already been decided. And that has happened. And then what happens is, once that happens and then this is enacted as is, you find people going to court. It's happened with the minimum tax. It has happened with other provisions. So to arrest all that, we should have, a clear, map of how public participation should look like.
Unless it was never intended.
Yeah.
Unless it was never intended that public participation, as is envisioned in this documentation, is actually so that the people of Kenya will have a voice in governance. That's what it was supposed to do. But unless it was designed in such a way that you will show up at a town hall meeting building, and then you will go home, and they're really not going to take your views into consideration.
Exactly.
Yeah, but for me, I don't think that we should be limited to just just having the bill. I mean, we followed it up. County government, some of the counties have, and I mean have bills. And as one who has really been championing on public participation, I believed then, still do. Perhaps I was slightly younger and a bit more not too wise. But I believed that participation, and when you look across, being able to engage in your own governance is a critical step. But participation must not be limited to just being able to provide memoranda to Parliament. It includes picketing. It includes, protesting. It includes going to court. in as much as going to court has proved to be a very expensive route because you get judgment 3 years later. I hope now it can move faster. Public interest litigation has taken, if you look at the CDF case, for instance, it's taken 12 years to get to the Supreme Court. And still it's sort of like we still have a judgment, in terms of practice. So my thinking is that we must ensure that we are utilizing, and Kenyans, I think we all need to just get to a point where we accept. And you ask the question, how bad can it get? I think it will get too bad when we also cannot even, we who think we have an income, cannot actually meet our own expenses. And Greece got there. Already we are starting to see early signs. Because as I'm saying, unless the expenditure of government is reined in, it will get to a point where we are unable to meet and with the moment, and we remember that unfortunately government is, our growth is government spending led.
Yes,
a lot of it, whereas it should be the other way around. It should be private sector, because only private sector can create the kind of employment, because we're trying to create a wealth, and you see a lot of welfareism in this. Those who have pay more. That's a language in NHIF. Pay more so that then, yes, you pay more so that you support those who. We already support those who do not have, because all of us, in one way or another, are involved in supporting. The social safety net of so many other people in that sense. But unless, and the language of this government, which I still hope at one point, even the advisors seem to be changing language, was that we are going to empower the economic hubs, the economic productivity, the hustler, the business, the manufacturing, because that's where you create employment. And when you create employment, then you have money circulating within, you have people to spend. And when people are spending, then you have something to tax.
You know what is odd is that in the 90s, the World Bank, IMF, I can never tell the difference, described what we call the Juakali sector as the hidden economy. That's what it was called. But the thing they found about the hidden economy, that was after they had given us a doomsday scenario of how the economy was going to collapse. They realized that economy was never going to collapse. And the hidden economy, they realized, was the engine. So the messaging of the just recently concluded campaigns by the Kenya Kwanza government was a good campaign. It's like recognizing that if we really uplift this sector, this economy will grow in leaps and bounds. So, good narrative. But
at least get it fast leaping, and then
put it to practice in some way.
Practice so that, our argument is that I don't think you can build an economy without taxing.
No, you can't.
You can't. Especially if you are going to avoid the situation where you have to now depend more on borrowing. You have to.
Yes.
But before you tax, you at least need to feed the cow.
True, but actually there's a complementary perception that must, you use the word perception carefully here. If you look at the promulgation of our current constitution and what our political leaders have done to bastardize it, the integrity, leadership and integrity.
Chapter 6.
Yes. There was a complete onslaught on that one.
Oh, yeah.
So that even when we're talking about, because when you talk about the need for there to be probity and for people to be held accountable, Chapter 6 comes into play.
Correct.
But once it's watered down to the point where even if you go to court, you cannot really hold someone accountable, then how are we going to hold? Because if it hadn't been cannibalized as it has been, but even leave that aside, look at the two institutions that were helped to shepherd this thing. The Constitution Implementation Commission, the Transition Authority. Okay, yeah. These ones were done with quickly, and not too much funding so that they don't create too much of a fuss. So the very things that would have enabled us to have the accountability we keep speaking of, our parliamentarians, our elected leaders guaranteed that wouldn't happen. Now we have a government who seems like every law they find uncomfortable or inconvenient.
Change it.
Yes, it's like, I know this one isn't working well. Change it. No, this one is really not working well. No, there are around 10 others. Bring a finance bill and throw all these ones under it, and then here you are. So, when we talk about having a situation that is about to bring about change. The only change will be when the citizens decide they've had enough of this nonsense.
Article 1.
Yes.
It's the people.
It's the people,
Yeah.
and that's why I'm saying we cannot give up on our country. And honestly, I mean, and I said earlier, this document is now in Parliament. Two ways to look at it is to look at Parliament as the place. I mean, it's been big. Parliament has been a big letdown. All the numbers I was talking about were approved in Parliament.
Yeah.
Both the initial and the revisions.
And the revision.
Yes.
Without questioning.
What I pity.
It sailed through.
It sailed through.
How do you raise the deficit from 600 to 1.12?
Yes.
And then you just,
So
It's okay.
come on.
and of course, I mean, but because that's the institution we have elected for ourselves, elected in the sense of we have chosen as an institution
Yes,
that is
we
to
have.
make decisions for us, we have to find a way to either create pressure on it, because we are the voters,
What do you propose? I see you're heading somewhere.
I propose that first of all, if every Kenyan who is of a sane mind and a voting age can write to their member of parliament, and you don't have to understand the finance bill, you just need to describe your situation. That's one. The other one is to say and demand. There are things you don't even need to be able to understand in the finance bill, as it were. You should be able to ask questions. Why doesn't our health facility? Because when we have this political pressure, because politicians understand numbers and
Oh,
votes.
they do. And they're very sensitive to those.
And they're very sensitive. Even to the president, why should we shy from writing to him? And saying this is the situation, that political pressure is what will make them action. Because right now, unless you're starting to say, let's go into a constitutional kind of a change process, I don't think that's the general direction. And the questions we're asking are questions around accountability. What is this? I mean, one of the words that seems to be getting very quiet in this government is corruption.
Yes.
Hiyo jina siku hizi
It's not big.
it's not big, haisikiki.
It's not talked about at
It's
all.
not talked about at all. And I am pushing that the only way to solve the issues that we are having is to start pushing, first of all, for people to take responsibility. The same way we are expected to take our responsibility and we're not given a chance. If this becomes law, you will
Yeah.
not be given an option
But two.
but to.
Yeah.
Why shouldn't there be the reverse
Same.
of it? My thinking. So we cannot give up on public participation. Is that many of us have assumed
That is,
the few
it's
will
all-
go and speak for us.
I see your point. I buy the point. Don't even talk about the president and parliament. Focus it. This elected representatives, because that's where the finance bill is right now.
Right now, it's in parliament,
They
and
ought to feel the pressure
and they
say,
need to ask the
no,
questions.
we are not going to allow this to happen. If it means that they reverse their own earlier approval of a 3.6
Let them.
trillion shilling spending, they should go back. and
especially
do
in the
that.
medium term. And you see, what we are saying is, once business picks up, once the economy is performing and you have things have resumed some level of normalcy.
Yeah.
And then also you are also demonstrating with the little that is available, you're providing public services.
Yeah.
Then you can bring in an argument of, guys, you also can see incomes have improved. Life is changing. You expect more from us. We have given you what is within our means. Can we?
Can we raise?
Well, and also, I mean, obviously part of the reason should be for public participation is to ensure equality or equity,
Yeah.
fairness, because there are some of the provisions here that create inequality. For instance, formal or private employees get taxed on everything that they get from
It's true.
from the employer.
Yeah.
But there's a provision here that allows public officers to spend, and it doesn't have a limit, and then that goes, free. They are not taxed. Whether they purchase, a capital equipment, or capital, they incur capital expense,
As individual public
even in
officers.
their own name. Yes, it doesn't matter in whatever it is.
Boo, explain that one. Start again.
Yeah, so the change is public officers. So the rule is you don't get taxed if it is a reimbursement of a cost related to the employer.
Okay.
So whether it's public or
private.
private.
Okay.
Now, but of course, to evidence that the expenditure relates to the employer, then it has to be for the employer.
Yeah.
But if you're allowed to get reimbursed for an expenditure that relates to you
As a person.
as the employee, that is a taxable benefit,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
But this provision seems, this introduction seems to exempt public officers. And public officers, I think, is a very wide.
Public officer is everybody.
Is everyone.
Everyone,
Works in-
yeah.
It includes state officers.
Yes.
Yes.
It's the other way around that
Yeah.
doesn't include.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes.
So, it says for official duties, but every day they do is official duties.
Yeah.
Well, it seems to underpin that they are unofficial.
So this
duties.
means that, for
Yeah.
example, mileage claim
Yeah.
is not taxed.
No, which means it won't get taxed.
It won't get taxed,
Yes.
right?
But here, reimbursement of an expenditure incurred for purpose of performing official duties,
Yes.
which is every day.
It's everything.
Is everything, notwithstanding the ownership or control of any assets purchased. What do you think that means? While in the private
So if I
sector,
buy a house and decide I will be working from my house.
Yeah, it's, it's as an office.
So that one,
a car, you see,
unaenda
the
nao
ownership
kazini
is
kila siku.
yours,
Yes.
so you're reimbursed. Now, here,
Hey, God.
you get reimbursed, so your employer buys for you, you get taxed. You see, that's inequality. Come, now, look at it on the other hand. Any fee charged on digital lending is now subject to excise.
Yeah.
A lot of the informal sector are people who
Fuliza.
Who rely
Yes.
on that? Yes.
Yep.
who fuliza, which means now that becomes,
The cost of borrowing will go up.
it will go up.
Yep.
Yes.
Now compare that with your conventional borrowing. You know, when you walk into a bank and get a loan.
We go to INM and ask
So
for
that's
this
cheaper compared to
unsecured.
this. Now, what's the difference? And are you really promoting?
Supporting the
yeah,
bottom up.
supporting. You know, some of this.
Is this a bottom-up
Yeah,
really economic
they actually,
transformation?
they go against the economic policy, and they create inequality.
Let's take a
The
break.
content creators,
Yes.
the content creators or digital content monetization.
Yes.
So they will be subject now to withholding tax of 15% because it's seen as professional
Service.
Then the professional service is at 5%. So you see, this is at 15%,
Yes.
and it doesn't matter their costs. Are you seeing the inequality again? So the reason for more public participation, at the very least, for
It's like these guys were just looking at put things here. Put.
My
put.
sense
Hold on.
is what I say.
Let's take this break.
Yeah.
We come back and we also want to open the phone line 0719 012 600. Okay, so the tax is here and this is what is being discussed. It's before Parliament. The question is, what should we tell our members of Parliament as they look at the finance bill? They have called for public participation. They've asked for memoranda, members of Parliament, on this particular one.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Abraham, you say this thing is before Parliament. We need to engage with Parliament.
We
We need to make Parliament feel the pressure that we feel.
No, we must, yeah.
The kind of pressure and that was subjected to Parliament in that last time. The Finance Committee of, what's her name, the now Governor of Ombaso?
Gladys Wanga.
Gladys Wanga, right? And the issues about, this thing is increasing tax on unga, tax on bread, tax on this and the other. And they sat back and said, no, we have removed this one. You can't touch on this one. But still, it continued. If we see that we have raised our deficit, every year we raise the deficit Basically, we finish a financial year with a deficit of, like you said, over how much? 700 billion every year.
On average.
On average. We're basically allowing the government to go and borrow that amount of money. Every year we are allowing borrowing to the tune of. This year they are not likely to hit the 2.5 trillion. Not likely. So let's say they raise 2.2 trillion shillings, on a very good note, We are basically saying that in the next financial year, the deficit is going to be close to 1.6 trillion. And we are allowing that. And we have debts to repay.
Yeah, why? I feel it's a big disconnect. And I've been trying to think of what could be the incentive for Parliament, especially for the National Assembly, to make such decisions. Because sometimes when you speak to individual members, they seem to see the sense. What happens on the floor of the House needs a forensic study and a longitudinal one, just to observe over time
what happens to this person.
What happens at the floor. But my thing is that disconnect needs to be, and the only people who can break that disconnect is the voters themselves. By putting pressure. But secondly, I think the current government owes it to Kenyans to make things easy until the economy improves.
To stabilize the economy. That's what President Ruto came in and said.
Precisely.
My first order of business, stabilize the economy.
Precisely.
Lately he's been saying, now that the economy has been stabilized.
Which one?
See this one.
Kenya.
That's what he's been saying. The first thing that I needed to do in the first 3-4 months was to stabilize this economy. But now that this economy is stabilized.
But we are not out of the woods yet.
Okay. So
and let's cut him the slack and say, okay, fine. So he found
a dilapidated
economy and 90.
I'm unable to use those words because he was the deputy president.
He didn't find.
He continued into one.
He participated in that government.
So that some of the expenses we are incurring were bound. This was bound to happen. But we are not here by surprise or by shock of some ill motives of somebody or whatever. We saw this coming. The day we took the Euro bonds, whether the money arrived or not, we knew we will pay.
Yes.
The more we have been, mopping the economy and lending money to government from the domestic borrowing, 400 billion, 450 billion per year, we knew this moment would come.
Yes.
So we shouldn't look surprised by that. What is surprising is that even when we knew this was coming, we still are not changing how we are spending.
We're not changing our habits at all.
Yes. Including even in expanding appointments beyond what is, think about the CAS. Somebody was saying, but they're just 50.
It's a small percentage.
Jobs for the boys and the girls. But you're forgetting that there are so many other attendant costs.
Yep.
With the kind of projects that the people in their villages expect them to bring.
Yep.
And includes the political cost I was talking about of when you want to rationalize, then you don't have the space. So right now we don't have the fiscal space to wiggle. And my thinking is that, recommendation really, what we'll be writing to Parliament, and we've written this, because this is a whole process. We wrote it during the budget policy statement when it came in, when we saw the deficit. We say this is not sustainable. You need, saying we are going to push it to percentages, 4%. 4% means nothing. What is important is the absolute number that we are talking about, because that is what buys you. That's what you borrow from the market.
Yep.
You don't borrow a percentage. You borrow actual money, And when you're mopping all this money out, and then you are not even, you're cutting agriculture spending by 12%, for instance, and other critical spending, you're not increasing manufacturing, then it means that even your forex
will not grow.
And you need it. The Americans are now mopping their forex, to build, to deal with their own problems.
Sort out their issues.
Let's
go to the phone lines. I've got 2 callers on the line. Robert in Nandi, good morning.
Good morning to guys.
Mambo namna gani?
Niko mzuri. You guys have scared me from the time I opened my radio in the morning, because I'm unable to move.
We're telling you what they're doing.
See, with those that suggestion of the taxes that you guys are talking about today, it sends a chill on everybody's spine.
As it should.
And okay, it's the truth, but the big question is, who is this who has a good mind, a good brain, possibly somebody who's going to school to study economics, and doing all this, knowing that the repercussions to it may not be that pleasant to the person they are trying to apply those taxes on, and possibly making our lives very uncomfortable, because at the end of the day, what if the end result of those taxes is not achieved? I mean, we'll be back again 10 steps back there.
Yeah.
Yet the promises were, let us stabilize this thing. We got it an empty shell. Let's make it better. So by increasing the taxes, at the end of the day, the consumption will go down, and the taxes that are meant to be realized may not even be there.
Yep.
And our lives will be so bad that maybe even the mental cases that we are talking about right now may double, yeah? So are we making this country a better place to live in or the worst place to live in?
That is the critical question.
I'm a very sad guy today, but I think for you guys, I think you need to get somebody from Treasury and have somebody like the panelists that have come in today. Let them sit across the other side and really tell us what was the aim of bringing these things to this country at this time.
We will seek them out. Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, get them, sir. Bring them, because this is scary. Taxes everywhere. Ata kanisani taxes. Where taxes? This is enough, man.
Miriam in Donholm, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Thank you. On 10th of October 2022, you analyzed my story, which was in the Nation newspaper. Actually, I woke up early morning and I was telling my husband, gosh, these people are talking about me, because he puts Spice FM very early in the morning. So you really analyze the story well, and I realized, wow, this is a really mature media.
What story was it?
So I've been wondering,
What story was that?
The story of the lady who was working at Bomas of Kenya, who had issues with the employer. They were in court for a decade, and she won the case, and they had refused to pay. Even after I won the case.
The lady is you.
The lady is Miriam.
Yes, that was the story.
Okay.
So I was wondering if I was interested just to come and do a live maybe interview. How would that be? Basically, from that time now, I just revisit what has been happening, because that's 11 months. Yes.
Your ordeal. That is very much possible. What you do is just stay on the line. Our producer, Ednah, will talk to you. Then we'll pick a date, and after that, we'll get in touch.
Okay.
Asante, Miriam. 0719-012-600, talking about tax and the finance bill that's before us and what we expect to see or hear from our government. So, he said we are stabilizing.
The other thing also to say is that, remember, we have been on an extended credit facility from the IMF. The 234 billion, which was supposed to be direct injection into the economy, try and stabilize. We've just gone through the fourth review, and some of these tax measures, were some of the conditions, especially on and all they care is that we are raising more taxes and revenue to be able to pay off our debts, and as Bilo I think said here earlier, all they care is that the people who put money into them, who are also lending to us directly, are being paid back. That's all. But whereas that as it is, the using of the resources is not a responsibility of the IMF. It's our responsibility.
Yes.
It's a responsibility of our government, and therefore you cannot say the reason also why we are not spending well is because we are on this conditionality.
Because of IMF.
You know? And when you look at the fiscal consolidation, which basically big part of fiscal consolidation was on reducing the cost of government. Let me use one example. So I talked about the tax expenditures, which definitely have become a black hole. We seem not to be able to rein in. Who are these guys who keep, and you've heard the story, some of these guys, after they run the 10 years, they rebrand, they register afresh, they get a new 10-year rebate, But let's talk. Let's bring it close. State-owned corporations. We try to avoid having this conversation.
Yeah.
State-owned corporations, the KQs of this world, the Kenyans, there are 343 of them. They have since increased even after they have since increased even after. You remember the commission? I think it was led by Madam Kariuki. She was the KEPSA, or is it Abdikadir? I think.
Abdikadir.
Yeah, Abdikadir. That made.
But he was the president's advisor.
Yes, that made recommendations on consolidating. Why is it important? It's because 30% of our spending is through state corporations. Yet it's a black hole because a lot of the accountability, the last audited reports we have, at least of all the state corporations, I think it's 3-4 years ago, borrowing, the public guaranteed borrowing is to those institutions. Yes, the guys we are bailing out, who we never put in the budget. For instance, Kenya Airways is never on the initial budget, but only jumps out in the supplementary budget. It's being bailed out, but it's always full, and the most expensive airline. Do your math, in terms of profits and so my concern is that these are some of the areas we need to ask honestly. Are we spending efficiently? These institutions, a lot of them are duplicating roles, both of the national government, because you still have a state department that is responsible for transport or roads. But you still have Kera, Kura, and Kenha, and everything else, including what NTSA does and what the police do, and all these other authorities. Because I feel that 30%, if you think about 30%, for instance, of 3.6, you're talking about 1.2 trillion. It's far much more than even our deficit and what we are borrowing. And when you add the public guaranteed debt, because they are the ones that are guaranteed, to borrow, it tells you that. By just dealing with, again, over and above dealing with the initial issue I raised of the leakages and the corruption, all that involved, fixing these state corporations that duplicate a lot of roles gets you again into a path. The question is there political will? And that's what I'm saying, putting pressure on politicians, because a lot of these things are proposals that lie in parliament, nobody's actioning them, because only parliament, in my opinion, honestly, can call the bluff off.
But guys, as I listen to this conversation that we have today and other times, this whole issue is a political problem. Just like I asked you, Chris, you sit with these people, they are experts. These are guys that have gone to school as you people. They're professionals. They live the life that we're living. But there's a political pressure that bears so hard on them that they make such kind of decisions. It's a political problem. Do you think the political problem comes from the citizens? And here's the thing. Today, Nyang' Nyong'o is in the news talking about public appointments. One of the reasons for Maandamano is public appointments. There's expectation that, we as shareholders, we contributed to this, so therefore we want public appointments. We want to see projects in our area. So there's a lot of political pressure from us to the politicians to what we want them to do. So they are left with, the only thing that they want to do is look for ways in which we'll appear large, to absorb all this politics that we are in.
And Nyang' Nyong'o is an appointing authority. Is he above the very things he's talking about himself?
Of course he's not. Again, pressure.
But this pressure really...
does he respond to the pressure? That's the issue.
It's a created pressure because... Think about it. So politicians will tell you that, the reason why, for instance, things are the way they are is because people are waiting on me to provide the money for for paying school fees. So it means if you fix the education system,
that won't happen.
That won't happen.
Yeah.
If you fix the health system, people will not have to line up. Mtoto ni mgonjwa, nitumie pesa ya kupeleka mtoto hospitali. If you fix the roads, But more importantly, if you fix the business environment so that, Mama Mboga, whoever, can be able to make a meaningful income out of their labors, out of their efforts, then it means a lot of that. But then what it does is that then it reduces the importance, the self-importance of the politician in the village.
Yeah.
Because then people are in charge of their own destinies in terms of being able to meet their own costs. And so a big portion of that can be addressed by fixing public services, in my opinion. But if you don't fix public services, then you keep insisting on, we have to give these handouts, we have to keep making sure we are providing for all these, things socially. My opinion.
Yeah, well, without, of course, sounding or being looking on the politics of it, I think pressure from people, if it's about projects, that's good pressure, in my view. If we want a road, we want a bridge here, a hospital there, those are good, that's good pressure. I think in my view, we cannot afford to be a begging entity, let me use entity or government, that is, lives large. You get what I mean? You're begging, but you're living large, which is a contradiction of itself. I don't think so a lot has been done in other countries. I think recently, is it the Zambian president who came in and said, or is it Malawian president, who came and said, he received a bill to pay for new cars, and he said, are there no new cars? Why do I need, are there no cars?
Are there no cars? Yeah.
Why do I need new ones? You see, we've had certain, I think, regimes. I would think Jamaica, that come in and say, we'll take a pay cut. That has happened. Or we are not going to incur, anything above
this amount.
What we need. Why do we need chase cars? Why do we need all that? Why is there a lot of wastage? So we can, if we work on our recurrent expenditure, I think we would have, savings for handling the public pressure, in my view.
If we work on it.
Yes. If you look at even your household, it's run the government like a household, or even a corporation. When things get tough, what do? You start cutting back on things, unnecessary things, so that you're just left with enough for
what is
critical for development expenditure.
Good point made. Chris and Abraham, thank you very much for joining us today. Asanteni sana. It's 10 a.m.
Just like that.
Imagine.